everyone, welcome to another Music Talk Tuesday, and today's Music Talk is kind of involving something unique in that it is about breakup, and in particular breakup songs. Now, breakup songs I've defined fairly loosely, just because it's maybe intended to be or can be interpreted as a breakup song. Doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a breakup between two people that are maybe in a romantic relationship. It can also be two people who've been friends or who've formed a strong bond in some way, shape, or form. It's not really intended, all of the songs, to be about in particular romance, but it seems like for the most part, the ones that I did pick can be associated with a more romantic-like relationship. However, there are certain songs that maybe don't necessarily have to be applied within a romantic relationship context. So that's just something to keep in mind as I kind of go through and explain each of the songs that I've picked as my favorites. So I figured, why not start off this list a little bit more lighthearted and give you guys a little bit of a song that's not necessarily as downtrodden or depressing, and more humorous in its own respects, I guess. And I guess you could say. And it's called Love Stinks by Geils Band. And I find the song rather amusing. I mean, I did not hear of the song until I watched The Wedding Singer. However, I do find the song and the original artists, the Geils Band, who did the song, I find it to be very, I guess you could say, it's humorous in its way because it's fairly upbeat throughout the entire thing, and it doesn't seem to have any depressing parts so much, or any kind of indication that there is really a split up. But I still define it as a breakup song because I still think that it offers something to the table as to why maybe some particular relationship can't work out, maybe even to begin with. And this is kind of emphasized through the lyrics when it says something to the effect of that the narrator loves this person, but the person that the narrator loves somebody else. And I find that fairly interesting because you'd think that somebody would write it in a more sad, emotional type-esque approach, but this is more done in, I think, kind of a humorous way, and in a way that's more upbeat and says, yeah, that's just how it is, you just gotta accept the fact that love stinks, and sometimes it doesn't work out for you, and you can probably say that it's probably, there's been probably other people that have had those similar circumstances as well. So really, this song ultimately, I think, really displays itself in a more lighthearted way and sort of tries to say to the audience, hey, this is just how it is, and you might as well laugh at it because it affects everybody. And I like how even in the song, when every time the vocalist says love stinks, there's this choir in the background that sort of repeats, or of the band members, I guess, repeating and going, love stinks P.U. and I find that interesting how they didn't decide to take a figurative approach to it and instead be like, yep, it actually smells. It smells bad. You don't want to know how love smells. And for the most part, the entire song is basically the entire rest of the song, as the narrator continues on explaining certain things. It's the majority of the time it's about love itself and what love does to you. And I think it's, in a way, it's trying to be upbeat so it can be relatable and the audience can grab a hold onto it and just kind of roll with it. And I think that's why a lot of people find this song fairly appealing. And you almost have to kind of, it's almost one of those songs that you have to kind of watch too, because in The Wedding Singer it is kind of emphasized that this is something that not only that Adam Sandler's character is going through, as you see in The Wedding Singer, but what a lot of people that surround him are going through. So it's trying to be that kind of a song, I think, and it's really displayed within the Wedding Singer as well. And I can probably put the Wedding Singer's version down in the description if anybody wants to check that out as well. But yeah, Love Stinks. Let's laugh about it at how horrible it is and how it messes us human beings up so badly. But I think that's really all I can say in the end about that song for the most part. Now the next song I wanted to briefly address is called With or Without You by U2, and this song is a little bit harder to interpret because again, the references that it's making through the song can be interpreted for various different ways. But it is sort of indicating this conflict within somebody's mind. And I think when somebody's going through a breakup or going through some tension within a relationship, there is this sort of feeling of, I can't live with or without you, like it says in the song. And it's interesting too how he also expresses this, and how Bono expresses this through in various different ways as he's singing. And at one point he says, "My hands are tied, my body bruised. She got me with nothing to win and nothing left to win, nothing left to lose." So really, it's sort of stating the same concept of the with or without you, not being able to live with or without you, but in a different way, in saying that I have nothing to lose or gain from this relationship, really. And I'm at sort of this crossroads, and I don't know what to do. And I think that's really a lot of what the song is encompassing and trying to say to the audience. And it also really does have this sort of haunting feeling to it, especially in the way beginning, and how it starts itself off, especially with Bono's voice, who sort of starts a little slow as well, and a little bit softer. And then it sort of builds up, and I really like the emotion that Bono displays throughout the entire song. He seems to be really into it, and he seems to give a lot of effort in what he's trying to say. And you sort of feel with every word that he's saying that it sort of has this meaning to it, and this sort of feeling, especially when he says something when he says, like, my hands are tied. And when he expresses all the other words within the song, you can kind of get the sense of his emotions and how those emotions relate to what the song is saying within the lyrics. And that's what I think I like about it so much. And again, I'm using breakup songs in a fairly loose sense here. This doesn't have to mean that it's somebody that he's been with romantically. Even though Love Stinks is probably a little bit more geared towards romantically, I think this one can be interpreted through either way, or it can be any kind of relationship, I think. I think it can be with or without your dog, with or without anything else that's within your life that you find to be at a crossroads with. And I think the crossroads part is really something that's important, and can have, and can result in problems within a relationship, and how you're not sure how you feel about somebody. So really, that's for the most part what this song is trying to say. and I find it fairly emotional and powerful, and I think it really drives home what a lot of people are going through, and what a lot of people have felt or are feeling. And that's why I think the song resonates so well and does a good job of emphasizing its points as you listen to what it's saying, even though some of the lyrics can be interpreted in various different ways. Now the next song I wanted to talk about is fairly different compared to the first two songs that I mentioned, and that it's not really necessarily humorous, and it's not necessarily so deeply tragic so much as it is fairly angsty and angry. This song is by Alanis Morissette, and it's called You Oughta Know, and basically this song pretty much spells out what it's about for the most part, but it's basically Alanis is expressing a breakup that she went through, and sort of the angry emotions that she feels from that breakup. And you can really see within her voice the sort of tension. It starts in the beginning of her being kind of, she's restraining herself sort of in the beginning, and then towards the middle she starts getting really mad, and it's almost at some points it doesn't really sound like she's singing, but rather talking, or like talking slash singing, where it's like half singing half talking almost. But at the same time, I think it works to the song's advantage because it makes it feel really authentic and real. And the interesting thing too is as though she builds herself up and gets more and more angry, but then she calms down again as she's going through, I think, the second verse, and then she builds herself up again. So it's interesting to see these kinds of transitions throughout the song, which makes it, I think, a lot more of an entertaining song because it doesn't seem to display the same mood throughout the entire thing. And the You Oughta Know title of the song really refers to her trying to express to the narrator, this is what you ought to know about how this event affected me. And I think for the most part, it is clear that the person that she was in a relationship with cheated on her. So that's really what's driving her up the walls. and I think it's fairly real, and I think some people have really gone through this, and it's really made them angry. Some breakups aren't really necessarily tragic, and some aren't really where you can just kind of laugh at it, but some of them are just really bitter and angry, and I think a lot of people have gone through this, or gone through these kinds of emotions, and it's clearly displayed in this song, and I think the song just does a really good job of emphasizing that anger and frustration that people have when they are dealing with this particular kind of situation. So I think that's really all I can say about this song, because it's pretty clear once you listen to the lyrics really what it's trying to say. But I really like how it's unique in its own way by making it sound, by having this sound of anger, and at the same time Alanis' voice being almost talky, but at the same time singing is also fairly interesting. And yeah, I think that's really all I can say about that song. Next song is called Against All Odds by Phil Collins. Yes, some people may, whether you dislike or like Phil Collins for whatever reason, I totally understand. Some of the songs I pick, I know some people may not care for, or may not be their cup of tea. I know that some people, even Doug Walker's not really a fan of Phil Collins, but I still like Phil Collins regardless. And this song, Against All Odds, I think is fairly, hits kind of the same emotional sort of stance as kind of as U2's song With or Without You. But it seems like the lyrics in Phil Collins' song are a lot clearer to interpret and understand, but it's almost instead of it being more at a crossroads, it's almost at the point to where it's literally, it's going to fall at some point. The relationship, it's like with U2's, you think crossroads, I think of a crossroads, but with this song, it's really almost bound to plummet and fail. And really, what Phil Collins describes in this song is the sort of emptiness that he feels, because he knows that person that came into his life and that really gave him so much within his life is going to leave him, and he can't do anything about it. It's against all odds, basically. That's what kind of against all odds means. It's the whole idea of them being together is pretty much against all odds at this point. And I find it interesting when he says, "So take a look at me now, where there's just an empty space, and there's nothing left here to remind me, just the memory of your face." And really, that's kind of sometimes what really ends up happening with breakups, is that people don't really talk anymore. People don't really even maybe see each other anymore, and all you have left is just a memory of what they look like, and nothing really else more. And then, yeah, maybe the personality or the emotions behind the face, but really it is empty when you don't have that person next to you. So it's just one of those songs that I think hits an emotional stance, but unlike the With or Without You, it does feel like the relationship is fairly hopeless and just dying, pretty much. It's in a coma and it's not going to wake up. The chances of it waking up are fairly slim, whereas With or Without You is almost at that crossroads of conflict between how somebody feels about somebody. So I think that's really what you have to get behind as you're listening to these different songs. And for the most part, I think With or Without You is a little bit more on the side of being maybe a little bit more dark, and Against All Odds is intended to be more emotionally tragic and not necessarily dark or mysterious, unlike With or Without You. So that's really all I can say about Phil Collins. I'll get off Phil Collins now and go to No Doubt's song called Don't Speak, Michelle, blah. But basically, Don't Speak is pretty it's pretty clear within the lyrics as to what it's trying to say. But the interesting thing is, it's not like a lot of the other songs that I've previously mentioned, in that the narrator doesn't really want to know that it's over. The narrator doesn't want to believe that this relationship is over, but it is, and that's just the reality of it. And it's hard for the narrator to accept reality. And this is especially emphasized when it says, "Don't speak, I know just what you're saying, don't tell me 'cause it hurts." And really, it's really the whole point of "I know just what you're saying, don't tell me 'cause it hurts," really, I think, emphasizes this whole point of, I know what you're gonna say, don't tell me because it's gonna hurt me. Don't make me feel those emotions, especially when a lot of people put in so much time and so much effort to try to make a relationship work, and then something like this happens, and they really don't want to believe it. They don't want to embrace the reality of the situation. And I think that's fairly understandable and fairly identifiable for a lot of people. And I think that's why Don't Speak is really well known among people who like No Doubt and who are familiar with the 90s, in particular when No Doubt was pretty much a hit and before Gwen Stefani went solo. But for the most part, it's a fairly interesting song in how it sounds as well, because a lot of the other songs that I've mentioned sort of display this very deep emotion, or like the first song, Love Stinks, are a little bit more lighthearted and more poppy. This song seems to have this kind of poppy air to it, but with maybe a little bit more sad undertones. And it's interesting to sort of see that combination of sound, because the song does sound interesting. It's just hard for me to describe how it sounds like, because it doesn't feel like a lot of the other songs where they're clearly trying to hammer down specific emotion. But it seems like in this song it's kind of a little bit all over the place, but it still feels emotional and powerful in its own right. So that's, I think, really all I can say about that song. It's pretty clear what it's trying to say. It's just the emotions that you feel from it may vary depending upon how it sounds instrumentally as a song. Now, the last song that I wanted to address is, and it is a song that is fairly depressing, so I kind of feel bad for leaving people on this note, but it is a more emotional filled song, but I find it fairly relatable and has this power to it that does feel a lot like what people maybe have gone through in their life. And this song is called Goodbye My Lover by James Blunt. Came out, I think, recently, within a span of 5 years. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure how old this song is, but I'm sure it's in the it is for sure in the 2000s onward. I just don't know exactly when. I want to say it's probably later 2000s. But basically the song sort of has the narrator discuss the relationship that he has with somebody, and he's addressing the person that he loves and cares about. It's not like he's addressing to another audience so much, and it's just interesting how even though for the most part the piano takes up the majority of the instrumental here, it does feel fairly emotional in its own right, and I like how it does feel fairly raw and fairly real when you really look at the song. And I kind of like how it doesn't feel like it's taking a side on between the two people so much as it's saying that that in the end it just didn't work out no matter how hard they tried. And I find it interesting when he says in the song, "Goodbye my lover, goodbye my friend, you have been the one for me," sort of addressing the fact that you have been, it's you're within my past now, you're just a part of my memory, and I think memories are really important within breakup songs, but I think within this song and in how he addresses specifically each verse, it does feel like a lot of what he's saying, along with the way it sounds, that it does feel very it just feels fairly raw and real, and there's no sugarcoating of anything. And I find it also interesting towards the end when he says, "I'm so hollow," and I think that really expresses the fact that now that this person is out of his life, he doesn't feel like he has anything within himself. It feels like there's something that was taken out of him that can't be replaced. And I think that's what a lot of people do end up feeling within those circumstances. And it's a fairly, I think, powerful song, and a fairly raw kind of song. And what I really mean by raw is that unlike the past two that I mentioned with Against All Odds and With or Without You, this song feels like it's not trying to address a specific, over traumatized emotion. It feels like it's doing it in a way that's just fairly reflective upon on reality between two people, as opposed to it being more about one person and one person's maybe deep emotions, like in Against All Odds or With or Without You, where it's basically addressing things more through one person's perspective and how that one person feels. Whereas in this song, I think even though the narrator is the guy in this case, it doesn't really put the other person at fault, so much as it's saying that I wanted this to work out, but somehow it just wasn't meant to be. So and this is how I feel because of that, instead of playing a blame game on the other person. So yeah, I think that's really all I can say about all these songs for the most part. I mean, I think they're fairly straightforward in what each of them is really trying to say. Even though there might be certain parts of the lyrics, if you listen to them, that can be interpreted various different ways, I think for the most part the emotions that I get from these songs are fairly reflective in how I feel about this sort of particular topic. But these songs, again, are fairly open to interpretation, and I think you can interpret them however you wish to. But ultimately, I think they do involve some form of a separation, or some form of separation happening, or some form of separation that is bound to happen. Or there's some conflict or tension. So, really, I think that's really all you need to understand when it comes to all of these songs. But I think that's really all I can say as a whole. Any questions, comments, and or concerns, more than happy to answer them. And until next time, everybody, bye-bye.